Welcome to Women's Wealth and Wellness Unleashed. I'm Lori Falk, and together with my four powerhouse co-hosts and a slew of thought leaders and luminaries, we're bringing you a scintillating talk show style podcast that will disrupt the worlds of wealth and wellness as we know them today. We invite you to go on this journey with us as we offer you a paradigm shift that empowers you to change your approach to these key areas of your life. Join us for Women's Wealth and Wellness Unleashed, where the future of wealth and wellness begins with you. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Women's Wealth and Wellness Unleashed. I'm Lori Falk, and I am here today with my four other amazing co-hosts, where we're going to talk about the topic of who decided what you will be when you grow up. Now, if you're in your 30s or younger, and maybe even if you're in your 40s or younger, this may not sound as applicable to you today. But what I would like to offer you is the fact that if we pull back the curtain 50 years to when the women's movement first started, we will realize that the work environment that we all were raised in, that we all grew up in, for the most part, was still very conservative and a little bit like Leave It to Beaver, where you were having the woman with the house coat, or not the house coat, but the apron over her dress, greeting her husband at the door with his cocktail as he walked in, and dinner was on the table. And that was the world that many of us were raised in. So we're dialing it all the way back to 1975. And in that era, I got so excited. I came home from high school one day and I said, "Oh my goodness, Mom, Dad, I figured out what I want to do. I want to go to college and be a psychologist. I really want to help people manage their lives and have better lives." And honestly, you would have thought I said I wanted to be a stripper. I'm not kidding you. They were so shocked that I wanted to go to school for 6 years and get a master's degree in psychology. And I got no, that does not work. You're a woman. You have 3 choices. You can be a secretary, a nurse, or a teacher. Well, I got to tell you, at that point, I just wanted to stick my finger down my throat and throw up, because none of that was at all, remotely at all, at what I was interested in. And 5 years later, my sister was told the same thing. All right. So I'm an epigenetic emotional healing coach. I deal with epigenetic emotional DNA all the time. So I'm thinking about this topic and I'm considering all of this, and I'm realizing that my mother was carrying all of her mothers, who was carrying all of her mothers' epigenetic emotional baggage around this. So this was drilled down deeply into my subconscious, into their subconsciouses. So they were doing the best they could given what they knew. But this was the women's movement. This was where women were having careers. My mother, bless
what
her
year was
soul.
that conversation took place? I want to I want to have it fixed on my timeline here.
Yeah, so probably 1974 would have been the
Okay, so
exact
that's
year
50
I
years
was
ago
having it.
exactly from right
Yes,
now.
yes.
All right.
And my sister 5 years later got the same story. Now, this wasn't necessarily universal. There were progressive families out there. I just wasn't part of one of them. And the masses were still more in alignment with this. So many of my clients over the years that are in a similar age group would tell you the same thing. So why is this important? Well, first of all, our dreams were squelched, right? Because seriously, I ended up in the fashion industry. They agreed that I could get a degree in marketing and fashion merchandising, which was way out of the realms of secretary, teacher, blah, blah, blah. But it was only a 2-year degree. So well, we wouldn't be wasting any money because, Lori, you're going to get married and your husband's going to support you and you're never going to have to work a day in your life. Your job is to be a good wife and a mother. Well, since I've been divorced for a long time and I didn't have any biological kids, I guess I'm not, quote unquote, a good woman from that perspective. But thank God I've done my emotional healing work around these things. So I'm no longer stuck in that paradigm. But now let's just lay the groundwork for what happens when you go out into corporate America with that kind of mindset. Flash forward about 5 years, and I was in at Gimbel's in the management training program. I was an assistant buyer. I was really super stoked and excited. My boss loved me. He thought I was doing incredibly well, and there was a buying position that opened up. And he went and told the president of the company that I should be interviewed for that job. And what do you think the president of the company said? You don't mean to tell me that pretty little blonde has any brains in her head, do you? Like, whoa. And my boss, he felt so bad. And I remember the look on his face when he walked back into the office after that meeting. And he said, I don't know how to tell you this, but not telling you this is going to be doing you a disservice. So please take this information and please go out and talk to another female buyer in this company that you really respect and figure out how you're going to overcome this, because this is going to hold you back. Well, long and the short of it is, I had this long, gorgeous Farrah Fawcett hair, which I cut into one of those spike, like this long, not kidding, spiked haircuts. And then I went out and bought these ugly junior house suits with Oxford shirts and little bow ties. I mean, I had looked like probably more of a fashion model because I'm in the fashion industry and I dress to the nines, but it didn't serve me at all in that business environment. Not at
Wow.
all.
Lori, I'm
Not
happy
at
to say
all.
I cannot picture that at all.
Well, as soon as I left corporate America, I grew my hair out and changed my wardrobe back up and became me again. But I literally had to become a poor imitation of a man to succeed in corporate America back then. And that's not unusual. It's not unusual at all.
No, it isn't. And I think what'll be interesting because as our audience is getting to know us, there are three of us here who are baby boomers, Lori being one of them, who came, into the workforce at a certain time. Leslie came along a bit later, and Jenny a little bit after that. So we thought it would be interesting to share our stories with you and sort of how that progressed. So, Lori, did you have a follow up to that, or shall I chime in?
Well, I will just throw another little tidbit on there. 2 years after all of that
Yes.
happened, because I actually did get a buying job. I was the budget junior sportswear buyer, which was fabulous because I got to help set all the trends for that age group. And the main floor job came open. The man who was the merchandise manager had been my boss in the budget store. He went to the same president of the company and said, Lori is a shoo-in for this. I don't need to interview anyone. I love working with her. She's got fabulous style sense. She's a fabulous businesswoman. She's the one I want for the job. And that same president said, oh, I'm sorry. I took her off the promotable list because she's divorcing one of the men's sales reps that our company deals with. So now again, nothing had to do with my ability. Everything had to do with my status as a woman and not playing the role properly. I mean, I flash forward to my nieces today. One of them has a PhD in nursing. One of them is in upper management in supply chain, and they are both killing it. They're spectacular. They're making in the six figures. They own their own homes. And I guarantee you, they haven't had 1/10 of these issues. Thank God I did my healing work. Thank God my sister raised them differently. We made sure we told those girls they could do or be anything that they wanted to do or be. And they are. And it's so like 50 years later, but all the muck that we went through in between and all the things that had to be cleared to get the beliefs shifted so that you could stand in your power in the workforce. It was a wild ride. Let's put it that way.
It was. And Lori, as you know, we're very close in age. So we
Hmm.
came into the workforce at the same time. And when I heard your story, because you shared this with us, it got me to thinking about, what was my experience. And it changed and it was mixed, to be honest. But I definitely had the same messaging that you did about the very narrow choices of secretary, nurse, teacher. I would add to that what we called stewardess in those days was also on the table. And I remember saying I was going to graduate from college and then be a stewardess so I could see the world and, before I did anything else. So I had that in my consciousness. But I, th- I think things changed because I graduated from high school in 1972 and I was one of the smart kids. So I'm really trying to remember what the messaging was in high school because I was among the group of, we were in what was called the advanced classes, and we were all going to major universities, Ivy League and sub Ivy. And it was, no gender issues. And in my family, I saw my brother recently, so it was kind of interesting to review this. He was 2 years younger than me. And and my family, I would have told you, was pretty patriarchal, except that I was the much better student than he was at that time. And my parents actually sent me to a private university and they sent him to a state school. So something must have flipped by then that was possible. And that in high school, those of us that were, the smart kids in the advanced classes, family, we went to the same schools that the guys did. I don't remember at that time, by then, there being anything different. However, fast forwarding, because like I said, this changed, but it was a little mixed. I started my career in financial services. I had majored in economics in college. For whatever reason, I was studying scarcity at the time. And I started my career on Wall Street. But here's the thing that I think the conditioning really impacted. It took me a year to figure out that I was in a support role and I was not in the hierarchy.
Mm.
And I don't think a guy would have overlooked that. So, like, I knew that you start at the bottom, but I didn't figure out that I was, in effect, a glorified secretary and that there was no direct path. So, in my case, I was so pissed off that I decided that if I was going to, if I needed an MBA to be anything in this world, because in those days that was a thing. So I changed jobs in order to get my MBA at night because I went to work for a bank that would pay for it. And I happened to be very lucky that I went into the pension industry that was exploding. And the hiring that they were doing, EEOC and other legislation in that industry came about at about the same time. So it was an incredible stroke of luck that we were being hired at higher standards and promoted really quickly. And I worked for an amazing woman and I didn't experience that kind of discrimination except for an incident with a chauvinistic, misogynistic, anti-Semitic guy that tried to get me fired. But that part of my career looked like it was, going well, except looking back, they were throwing titles at us, but not money. And it took me like a while to figure that out. So my story is, like maybe has some more twists and turns than Lori, but very much, being a woman was a factor and kind of a handicap to be overcome. I would say by the time we really got in there, it could be overcome, but it was still something to be overcome. And that's, I think many of us here are corporate refugees. I left that career, I started doing yoga, got weird, and now I'm doing this. But that imprinting is very much part of my history. And so I'm curious, how the audience is relating to this, and love to hear everybody else's story here.
Oh, I think what you were saying there. Sorry, Sherry, carry on. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I didn't experience that from my parents at all. My parents, I was encouraged to be whatever I wanted to be. And in fact, I was encouraged to be more than I thought I could be. I wanted to do 2 A levels, so that's the highest qualification you do at school. I wanted to do two A levels. My parents said, no, you're doing 3. I wanted to go to college. My mum and dad said, no, you're going to university. So everything from my parents' perspective was really, really supportive, encouraging, and really created confidence for me. However, when I started working after university, I joined a team that was a largely male team. And I didn't believe I had any issues with anybody in that team until one day, he wasn't a manager, but he was a kind of pseudo manager of the team, rang me up and said, are you aware that a number of the men have a problem with you? And I said, really? I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. Can you fill me in on what's been said and why it's been said? And I'm going back now probably about 25-ish years ago. And he said, well, the problem is you behave more like a man than you do a woman. And I was really shocked at that. But what you said, Laurie, really resonated. I believed I had to be, and I was in I had the padded shoulders, the power suit, and I had to give off that air of real confidence that men exude in a very different way to women. Then a couple of years later, I was working in Switzerland and I was moved over to effectively manage a project where there was a number of engineers, male engineers in charge. And I had to go in and sort them out because basically they weren't doing what they needed to do. And a few days later, I was called into my then temporary boss's office because I was like on a consultancy contract from my headquarters. And he said, the men have got a problem with you. And I said, why? Because you act like a man. I said, in what way? You have very firm boundaries. What the? I have very firm boundaries, and that makes me behave like a man. You mean I'm not acting like a soft, malleable, pliable woman? I've got boundaries. I'm behaving like a man, and they didn't like it. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, really. So that was my experience of that corporate environment, basically, that women were expected to behave in a certain way. And if they didn't behave like the little women, the malleable, go off and get everybody a cup of coffee, then the men didn't like it, basically. So that is my contribution for now. Sherry, I interrupted you, so please do go ahead.
Oh, no, you didn't interrupt me, but thank you. My story is very similar to Laurie's and Susan's. So we're
a generational thing, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's maybe I have a couple of years on you, but like I'll throw this in before I remember when girls were allowed to wear pants to school. So I remember, believe it or not, for a lot of people who were younger and listen to this, before 1970, thank you for that lovely chart you sent us, Laurie. But, women couldn't not only get a credit card, but you could wear pants to school. I mean, come on.
Just for the British audience, can I translate? Pants equals trousers,
slacks,
not knickers.
Thank you. My parents didn't didn't tell me what to do. They, as a matter of fact, they told me I could be anything or do anything I wanted to, but I always wanted to be a teacher. So I was somehow programmed during that time period, and went to university, went to college and got a master's in teaching, and did that for a number of years. And I did pre-kindergarten. I was licensed to teach up until high school, but I made really my specialty was pre-K and kindergarten, little children. And that's what I wanted to be. And then when some things happened with the Board of Education and I realized that I didn't want to do that anymore, I cried because I was like, what am I going to do? I'm supposed to be a teacher. What can I do? And I ended up I had been working part-time in retail, so I went into retail, and I was offered a new position. It was going to be a temporary position, as what they call the non-selling exec. I was a receiving manager working behind the scenes, not on the selling floor. And it was very unusual in those days that women were in retail operations. Laura, I could have been a buyer. I could have been doing anything that had to do with fashion, but women, in the back of the house didn't happen. And as a matter of fact, I remember my first meeting, I was sitting in a room, there were 25 people, 24 men and me. And I remember thinking, what am I doing here? I know how to work with little kids. What am I going to do? It was totally outside of
come
my
on, Sherry. You don't think like working with men is working with little kids?
It was, you know what, Susan? It was, because as a receiving manager, I was, behind the scenes working at the receiving platform. I remember them telling me, you're going to work on the receiving platform. And I looked at the operations manager who was interviewing me, and I said, I'm going to work with truckers, because that's what the trucks came in and brought in all the merchandise that you see, on the selling floor. And as I looked around, it was all boys and men. And I thought, big boys, little boys, it's the same. And they challenged me every step of the way. I would watch them operate and move and think that they could, move, don't hurt your back, or don't bend down that way. And totally, it was just an unbelievable experience. And I think of it as, remember the expression, the good old boys club? Remember that one? I was not part of that good old boys club, but the expectation was to act like them and do what they would do. At one point I got a promotion, I was promoted, and they wanted me to travel 4 hours a day, driving 2 hours one way and 2 hours another way to be an operations manager for one of their stores. And when I refused it, they said to me, you can't do that. All the guys take it. What do you mean you're not going to take the position? So it's very interesting. It was a very interesting time. Eventually things started to change, and women got more involved in operations and in managing the stores. But we know that things have shifted and changed over the years. But I want to bring one statistic in that I found, and it says, as of 2024, there were 52 women CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, and that represents 10.4% of the total number. And that was a record year for women. So how much have things really changed?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
Jenny, tell us, you kind of came on the scene somewhat later. How have they changed?
I think I'm on the cusp of millennial. I never have really paid attention to those sayings, but I was born in 81. So I think that's right on the cusp there. So, I definitely can look back, especially now with the work that I do. I can see how things were deeply rooted in my mother's psyche, and my grandmother, who they grew up on a farm, which is where I spent my summers. And my grandmother, I mean, we shelled peas, she was the mother, she was the homemaker, she had 5 children, I mean, she baked everything was from scratch. So you have that generation who went through the Great Depression, where, you had all of these, you learned, how to take care and manage and do all of these things yourself. So I loved learning those skills from her, and I never really thought about it, how it would affect me. And I was always really encouraged by my parents to go out into the world and, do great things. And I thank my parents for that. But I think it was society and unknowingly that kept us in certain parameters. I consider myself raised by Disney. I all of the Disney movies, everything from when I was little was the princess, the damsel in distress, waited for the prince to come along and save her. And this was, kind of the image. And growing up, I had a little book of, oh, how I want my wedding to look. And, I thought that when I was 20 and out of, I would find my partner, I would find my husband in
Find
college,
your
and
prince. Find
yeah,
your
I would
prince.
find my Prince Charming when I was in college, and I would marry, and then I would have kids. And I never even really considered a long-term career or what that would look like, because as a child, that was the picture that was painted, this kind of
Mhm.
finding your Prince Charming, and you weren't really worth anything without a Prince Charming, being single and, all of this wasn't even in my realm. And now that I am, forging a path as a single mom of two, it's very confronting. Um, and so you do have to break these generational ties. And I appreciate so much that we have the tools and the skills to do that today. And I hope that the audience sees the benefit of being with us to help, continue to break these ties, especially for our future generations, because we have to be doing the work now, right? So that's kind of my 2 cents. I feel like, just like, and now in the recent years, because I have 2 young kids, Disney movies have changed, and now we have these Disney princesses who, they don't need a man. There is no Prince Charming. It's all
Yeah.
this women empowerment, and these young kids, that all these young girls get to see this, which I love. So it is very different today.
Jenny, I'm curious because this thought just came to me and I'm looking around. You and Leslie are the only ones of us that are moms, and Leslie has boys. You're the only one that has a daughter, and I know she's 9. And I'm curious, as a comparison to what we've been discussing, and obviously she has you as a mother, so it's, maybe not indicative of the culture at large. But as you said, a lot of the conditioning is cultural. What are the messages that you think, Charlotte, as a 9-year-old girl in 2024, is receiving about her possibilities that are, represent a 50-year evolution? And
Well,
something, let's leave on an up note here
yeah,
of what
and
we can look forward to.
I'm so fortunate to have because I'm down here in Fort Lauderdale, and we have a wonderful public Montessori school. And so that's where my children are, in a public Montessori setting, which, if you know anything about Maria Montessori, she's all about honing in the skills, like, individually of the child. And so there's definitely a difference between that and public school. But Charlotte wants to be a scientist. She wants to be a singer. She wants to be a scientist. She wants to be an astronaut. She has all of these really amazing ideas of what her future looks like. And that's really encouraged, and there's so many possibilities now, but they bring them into the school system, which I love. So that's my positive little note on that, my little scientist daughter.
Well,
I think,
it sounds like there's progress that's been made. I don't have that day-to-day experience in the same way. I'm glad I thought to ask about that. Leslie, sorry.
And I do think progress has absolutely been made. I've got 2 boys, but both of my boys, are very, very respectful of females, very respectful of there are choices to be made, and we make those choices based on our own personal choice. I think coming back to Sherry's point with regards to just 10% of the Fortune 400 being CEOs, I would like to think that part of that is down to choice, because I would not ever have wanted to be the leader of a big organization, because come with that comes other choices that have to be made, because very often, for all the wrong reasons, very often we are compared to the men. So the men can do the long hours. They don't have to, go home to do school pickups or go and be in the audience for nativity, etc., etc. For women, when we try to have it all, it is made very difficult for us to have it all. I personally did not want to have it all. I wanted to have a career. I wanted to be successful, but I discovered that would come at a cost. That would come at a
It
cost
did.
of spending time with my children. So I chose to leave corporate. And when I left corporate, I had made the decision to leave, and then I was offered the opportunity to go for a massive promotion. And I had an ego issue. Do I go for this big promotion, even though in my heart of hearts, I did not want to stay in corporate? Or did I leave and do what I wanted to do, go and work with my husband in his business, giving me the opportunity of a career, but the choice to spend more time with my children? I went for the promotion, and I feel really fortunate I didn't get it. And I felt as though I put myself out there. I went for it. I didn't deny myself the opportunity, but I didn't get it. And there isn't probably a month that I don't think about it every day, but there's probably not a month that goes by where I don't thank my lucky stars that I didn't have to. Because I don't think women, some women can, but I think the complex that we have with regards to board meeting or nativity, big client or sports day. And I think for women, we are expected to make the mum choice, whereas dads, they may feel they should be there, but they're not expected to be there. And I think that is the big difference.
And
So I
Leslie,
think
that
it's
kind
really
of
hard.
parallels your other story about expectations from men and women's behavior being different in that environment.
Yeah,
But what's coming up for me as we're going to be wrapping this up, I think we've hit on another really important episode topic, because I know, Leslie, that's one of the things you've specialized in, is supporting women and leaving corporate. Most of us here are corporate refugees, and I want to kind of bounce the conversation up a bit, that in talking about Wealth and Wellness Unleashed, I'm going to speak for myself. I didn't just leave corporate because of these opportunities. These are systems that I didn't believe in any longer. I wouldn't be working for corporate at this point because that doesn't reflect my values at all. It's to me, that's what leashing is like, and we're pointing to bigger possibilities. And some of the exciting news there is that as entrepreneurs, as women that are doing what we're doing, we don't have any ceilings other than the ones that we are working through, the epigenetic stuff and the conditioning. But there's nobody out there denying us promotions, and we get to do and be all of that. And again, I know we all had different circumstances that caused us to make those choices. Leslie's, shared some of that, but I think that would be a really cool episode
agree.
for us to delve into this more deeply, because there's probably a lot of women that are, looking at some of these things. And, you just said, Leslie, about having it all, didn't want to have it all. It was that particular all that you didn't want to have. But I
Exactly.
think we can, in
Yeah,
this environment, have the all that we choose. And I look forward to exploring that more deeply, don't you?
absolutely. Can't wait.
So what do you think about wrapping up for today?
I have the perfect story to wrap this all up.
I knew you
So
would.
though, so For the audience who doesn't probably know this aspect of me yet, I actually do channel. And 3 years ago,
We're getting into
before-
quantum science here now.
Yes. Quantum science. I have an ability to tune in with the spiritual realm. And since my mom transitioned in 1980, I have actually been able to connect with her. And so as my niece was getting married 3 years ago, I was wanting to give her a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful gift. And so I was sitting here trying to decide what it was. And all of a sudden, my mother's presence could be felt. And I was inspired to write this, what Grandma would say at your wedding. She would tell you how amazed she is at how much the world has changed in the past 50 years. She would apologize to your mom and I for trying to hold us back in a rapidly changing world where she wanted us to just get married and have families and be like women were supposed to be. She would also apologize to your mom and I for limiting our personal goals and dreams. And she would applaud us for encouraging you girls to be all that you were meant to be. She would tell you, Ashley Ann, how incredibly proud of you she is. And at the same time, how astounded she is that one of her grandchildren, a woman nonetheless, has a doctorate degree. And not just any doctorate, but one in nursing, a profession she put on the list of acceptable things to pursue. That was until she herself got ill, and then that too disappeared. And she would be incredulous that a woman, not just any woman, but you, are now getting married and balancing the best of both worlds. She would be thrilled you have found your one true love. And she would be thrilled that you are upholding the tradition of marriage and incorporating it into your already full life.
That's beautiful. That was beautiful.
That touched me as much as my niece. And there wasn't a dry eye when I read this at her reception. But it really speaks to how much the world has changed. And my mom, who was so locked in those beliefs that she had way back then, who can now look at it from a 10,000-foot view from the spiritual realm, really realized how much it's changed and really was sorry that she held us back. So it's all choices. And even if you've grown up in environments like that, it's all fixer-upable. All you have to do is your emotional healing work, and you can change your reality. You can change your future. So we want to thank you all so much for joining us again for another episode of Women's Wealth and Wellness Unleashed. And we look forward to enjoying equally amazing topics with you in the days and weeks and months to come. Much love to all of you, and God bless. Thank you so much for joining us today on Women's Wealth and Wellness Unleashed, where we empower women to take control of the two most important areas of their life, their health and their wealth. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another amazing woman who's ready to elevate her wealth and wellness journey. Stay connected with us by heading to our website and joining our Facebook community. All the details can be found in the show notes. Until next time, keep thriving and unleashing your highest potential.